Well, good morning, everybody. We're glad to be back with you again. And today's actually a special conversation. And the title of this episode is When to Persevere or When to Move On from Your Dream. And David, I know you and I have talked a lot about this offline. Our guest today, Don, here, we're going to have a great conversation. But building a business and chasing a dream, it's not for the faint of heart, right? Like that's something I know, David, you have shared is that perseverance need and trying to keep moving forward and knowing when to push through obstacles is quite a challenge. So what has kind of been your take on it, David?
Well, this is why you hear us talking all the time about having community around you, about having supportive people around you, because starting your own business is not, as I have a friend of mine, we talk about it, like, this isn't the easy path.
Mm-hmm.
This is not the path where you want the least amount of challenges and the least amount of struggle, but it is, in my mind, the most rewarding path of
Mm-hmm.
being able to do the thing that you feel passionate about, the thing that you love to do with your life, but you have to be the one to build it and you have to be the one to make it go. And so it is that, as long, you have to have that a bit of intestinal fortitude, you have to have that perseverance, and you need to have people around you to kind of support you when you have days when it's just like, wow, 3 things in a row did not go well at all, and now what am I going to do? So
Yeah. Well, and this whole conversation really stems from a post comment that we saw from. So when we do these Facebook lives, then we turn them into podcast episodes, and then we roll those out. And so on episode 210 was the importance of following up, and it got our attention. The comment and the comment was this: "This is always one of the toughest decisions. You try and try and try, not seeing any progress, and decided to move on to avoid the consternation and anxiety. We all say don't quit too early, but what is the measure when it's time to quit?" And that was the comment by Don, our guest today. And Don, welcome to our show. We're glad to have you. You're actually, I think, our first guest on the podcast.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah,
I'm honored. That's awesome. I've done that a couple times on different podcasts, but it's great to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity to discuss this thing because it's.
yeah,
I think it's a big one for a lot of people.
absolutely. Well, let me give a quick bio background for you, and then feel free to fill in any gaps too after. But
Okay.
Don, you leverage your passion to help people find the career that energizes them and a life that fulfills them. It's about being their best self in the job they're in, or finding that next job where they can do the same. Um, Don, you knew early in life that you had a passion to clean America's waters. That's very interesting, by the way, and then lead teams to new heights. And after 36 years in the military and corporate leadership positions, Don now helps others find their passion, as many know the destination, but not the path. And I thought that was an interesting statement as well. So why don't you dive into that a little bit more? Give us kind of your expanded version of that. I mean, your journey has been interesting, it sounds like.
It has been extremely interesting, and I've been extremely blessed. And again, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. Clean America's waters, right? I was in 5th grade on the first Earth Day in 1970. Tells you how old I am, right? I turned 65 this year, and I'm just trying to act young, right? And but that just spurred something inside of me. And I was good at math and science. I was always ahead of my class, so I went to Wisconsin. You can see my Wisconsin shirt.
Proud
You know,
Badger.
Badger, yep, and got my environmental engineering degree. But in 1982, the recession, I had 454 rejection letters on my graduation party,
Wow.
and and I said, I got to do something. I don't want to go back and get a master's degree. I want to get out of school. So I joined the Air Force for 4 years to get some experience, and I stayed for 27. And I got to do some amazing things in the environmental arena. And then I got leadership opportunity after leadership opportunity. Next thing is I make colonel. At the 24-year point, I'm in Baghdad helping lead the reconstruction of the country. We're programming $12.3 billion worth of projects
Wow.
across the country. And it was just a phenomenal leadership experience.
Hmm.
But got out of that and jumped into the corporate side. Um, Consulting back into the environmental arena is kind of where I wanted to go back, but I just kept going back into leadership.
Hmm.
And Maxwell, I happened to see a John Maxwell team posted Thanksgiving of 14,
Hmm.
and I said I want to talk about that. I've always thought about being a facilitator and a speaker
Hmm.
and stuff like that. So I just jumped on it, and
That's awesome.
that's been a heck of a journey. But
Yeah.
and here's that entrepreneur piece you guys talk about target market? Who's your ideal client?
Mhm.
I thought it would be the architect, engineer, construction environment I came from.
Mhm.
It just hasn't resonated with them.
Mhm.
But what resonated was that career transition piece.
Mhm.
And from two perspectives. One, they're still losing 22 military and veterans a day to suicide. And the number one ideation for suicide in that group is career transition.
Mhm.
And now you look at the non-military the last couple of years with COVID and everything and the shutdown, 4.3 million people were changing jobs a couple of years ago every month.
Wow.
And now they've gone back and looked at surveyed people, and 70% wish they hadn't changed. They didn't find what they wanted. And I'm about trying to work something in those two arenas to help them find what they really want to do. I say the job that energizes you so you can have the life that fulfills you. And I think we're doing it wrong in certain areas. And that comes from me hiring well over 100 people at Booz Allen, um, reviewing over 1,000 resumes. So I've seen a lot on that side. I've applied for a lot of jobs, and that's really my passion.
Wow. That's awesome. I mean, hey, thank you for your service in the military for all those
Thank you.
years, especially too, because we know how critical that is, and facing a ton of challenges, I'm sure, and learning perseverance along the way in your military
It
career.
was.
So how do and we're going to have this conversation, right? We kind of talked offline, like that. There's no perfect answer to today's, topic necessarily, but there are some key things. And I think you even mentioned a couple things, and it's even in your bio here about sometimes people, they have an idea of a destination, but they're not sure of the path. And so, whether it's working in a job environment, more of a day job environment, like you were kind of referencing, or as we primarily focus on is the entrepreneurship side of starting a business and, trying to get going. How do or what are some thoughts that, what's that breaking point of holding on to that dream or when to let go of that ideal?
Yeah.
What have
And
you kind of explored with that?
well, one of them is the values, right? When does something finally break your values? I started a nonprofit just about the time COVID started, and a partner and I teamed together, and things were going well from a service perspective, how we were serving the client, but it wasn't going good from a partnership perspective,
Mm-hmm.
and we had different values, and finally, I just said I've got to leave. This is driving me crazy. It's not fulfilling. And I was doing some research coming into today, and it says, one of the 8 in this article was your goals don't align with your values, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as soon as I saw where I wanted to go and the things we needed to do, I've really, for entrepreneurs, the book E-Myth Revisited. I love how Michael Gerber has put it together.
Mm-hmm.
and and I said, we've got to follow something. We got to put this business together with a structure. And the answer was yes, but the action was no. And I
David, you've
said,
never experienced anything like that.
yeah. So I've just values. It's like this
Yeah.
isn't going to work.
Well, that's a
And
really good point, though. Just that a lot. I mean, so I'm hearing two things there. One is I'm thinking you're talking about a business partnership values.
Mhm.
That's very important, but also I would say individual or personal values, because one of the way back episodes I know we talked about, David, was mission over money, right? Like, because some people it's like it's the destination is I want this certain amount of income, and yet they kind of sacrifice their mission, their values, their vision for the sake of chasing money. David, I don't know if you want to expand on that a little bit of what you've seen or heard.
Yeah, I just think that's a too many times, especially when Don was talking about the people who have changed jobs, and then they change jobs and they're there for however many weeks or months, and then they go, oh boy, I wish I would have not done that.
Mm-hmm.
And there is that level of people quit. I do think people tend to quit too easy, because we have this belief within us that our problems are external, and some of them are, but a lot of our problems are not external.
Mm-hmm.
And when we try to think, and when we take the mindset of, well, if I just change my environment, all my problems are going to go away. And what we don't realize is that we carry a lot of those problems within us, our own fears, our own insecurities, our own improper sets of beliefs our own bad attitudes, our own wrong perspectives, whatever they may be, we carry those with us. So even if we move to another state, they went in the suitcase with us. Those
Wherever
things,
we go, there we are, right?
they're
We are, yeah.
they're with us. And so then when we start in the next environment, the next place where we're working, suddenly we realize, whoa, wait a minute, it's not going great here either. I'm like, well, your attitude sucked at the last one, and guess what? It's sucking here too. So,
That's right.
that didn't, until you decide to change that's never going to solve the problem. So some of this is, you have to understand, like, exactly, and again, the value match, man, I hear that, and you can go to that other one and you can start working with somebody, and all of a sudden they're asking you to do stuff. And especially in the world that we live in, there's a lot of companies that are really pushing their values. And I would, my wife works for a company that I have always jokingly said that, yeah, if I went and worked for that company, they'd probably fire me within the first hour, because my values are so out of alignment there. And my wife says, no, they would never hire you. They would figure it out before you. Like, there's no value match there at all. And it is important, because if you go there and if you don't agree, like, your values and their values, they're passing each other, that's a big problem, because you're going to start hating life very soon.
Yeah, I think you just hit on something that Michael Gerber talks about, which is figure out your primary aim, right? Too often when we're looking for a job, we just want something that'll pay us
Right.
now, that I can be remote, that I can be near my home, right? Gives me flexibility, but we don't really think about all the details of that job.
Right.
So then we get into the job, and exactly right, where you were going, it doesn't align with us. It doesn't align with our values. It doesn't align with our priorities. How many people have you seen work now 12, 15-hour days? You're missing time with your spouse, your girlfriend. You're missing time with the kids. That's what you really want. In fact, I'm sitting here doing a 21-day prayer thing this morning, and today's prayer piece was really aligning to, what do you really want in life? And until you define that, you can't achieve it. I was just picking up the book Think and Grow Rich, right? I'm working through a study. Chris, Paul Martinelli right now with his own company. He's doing it again. This is the fourth time I've gone through it. And chapter 2 is all about clarity. And until you know clearly what you want, both what you want, what you don't want, it's hard to achieve it. And as you said, when you get into those struggles, you're going to give it up if you're not clear.
I heard Mark Batterson, is one of my favorite quotes. It's so simple to jump on that. He said, most people don't get what they want because they don't know what they want. And I think that it just goes right along with that clarity piece. And, Don, I think about too, some of the stuff we talk about with the values match and everything. And even just, entrepreneurship is wide open to people these days too, right? So it's not just about finding the right job at a company, right? But a lot of people are saying, well, I want to work for myself because my values aren't matching, and that becomes obvious. But they don't understand, and most of us don't when we get into this, what it takes to persevere and do the work to get there. I was talking to a friend recently where he was having a down day, and he knew it was a day, right? He had to just get through it. But he was like, right now, I'm like, is this even worth it? Right? Like, that's the thoughts that entrepreneurship brings to us on the bad days. But when you observe people and the conversations you've had, even back to your military career as well, what do you observe in others regarding, like, the level of perseverance in most people?
So here's the interesting piece, and this is where I'm spending a bunch of time on career transition, thinking about mindset. What have we learned in the past, like you said, that you're bringing forward with you? So I persevered in a lot of jobs in the military that I really wasn't excited about, but I didn't have a choice.
That's
My
why I
boss
was thinking.
tagged me. Yeah. And if I wanted to resign my commission, I had to think about my active duty service commitment, because I had gone to schools and stuff like that. So I couldn't just get out. I had a payback period. But even if I didn't have that, it was a 6 to 7 month process. I had to apply to get out, and the Air Force could have said, no, you can't go. We need you, right? We need your career field. So I had to persevere. So when I got into some things in the corporate environment, my mindset was, you just got to stay. You got to nug through it. you know, and pretty soon I was waking up at 3:30 in the morning with nightmares and sweats, and my blood pressure was way up, and I was like, why am I doing this? Right. So you got to understand your personality, right? S's on the disc assessment, we tend to, you know, resist change, resist conflict. So we stay in things, but we
Mm,
question ourselves and we're always quiet.
mm,
And we've got to understand ourselves. We've got to understand our mindset of what we've brought with. I think those are two very important things. So for me, I've always stayed a whole lot longer.
mm.
You know, somebody who didn't grow up in that environment, who's more of a D, it's either it matches or it didn't. This is one thing that got me. I brought a guy on to my project in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, with Booz Allen. He met the client that morning in the IT arena. I flew to Kansas City to be with my kids, and about dinner time, I get this text: "Thank you for the opportunity. This is not for me. I'm resigning." I'm like, "It's one day.
Wow.
What did you see that?" You know, he says, I can't be successful." And I had already been there for 2 years, and I'm like, "You got to give me a little bit more than this." But he saw something right
Wow.
then. And more and more I've thought about it, I've come up with some ideas because he wouldn't give me any more. But how did he know that quickly? And you said the comment this morning. It's almost a personal piece, right? Based upon your personality, based upon your mindset, the luggage you bring with. So I've seen it across the board, and that's why this question I think was so good for me.
Mm. Well, I think it's interesting because David, you have talked about your how do I want to put this nicely? Your stubborn Dutch background.
That's one way of saying it.
Because right, I mean, it affects. There's the what fight, flight, and fight,
Freeze.
freeze, fight, and freeze. Right,
Right.
is
Right.
those are kind of our responses to things. And so, David, you are your background or your temperament or your personality, you're a fighter, right? Like you fight through a lot, you know. Whereas others, it's like you said, Don, one day on the job and I'm out, you know. Like those are polar opposites in there.
Mhm.
And you know, that's I think the tension of this question today is some people do stay too long, and that's not good for them. Whether it's in a business, in a partnership, or in a company, there's others who don't get enough time to break through that barrier. So, I don't know, David, what are your thoughts on that as well as your observations?
Yeah, well, I'm just still thinking about your fight, flight, and freeze thing. I'm like, I always had this picture of a bull charging you, and I'm like, the three personalities are the person who gets terrified and scared to death and freezes, the
Yeah,
smart one who takes off running, and then you have the idiots like me who run at the bull.
yeah. Look, I can get him.
I ain't taking any of your crap. Let's go. Like, okay, but no, I just the personality effects are going to be big because at the end of the day, no matter what the task is, and Don was talking about this earlier, being remote, like we're remote, and we start thinking, well, I'm going to get paid this much, and I'm just going to do this job. Well, but every job is interpersonal. Every job is very much a human to human interaction. You're going to have people that you work with, and there has to be some level of connection there. There has to be some level of where you feel like I fit on this team. I feel like, and again, this is something even like I see so many companies nowadays, and the culture is so poor. Um, and it's because some of this is that, and from a company's perspective, that what is the vision that you have for your company or for your business? So like for us as entrepreneurs, what is that vision that you have? What are you trying to do? What is your mission? What is it that at the end of the day your goal is? Because if that goal is I want money, whether it be through a paycheck or it be through sales in your business or whatever, that's bad. Those are rough waters because that's not going to be enough. And that's eventually not going to answer the call or the question. If the reason why you're doing it is deeper than that, I was talking to somebody yesterday and I told him, I said, I can't quit what I'm doing because I believe that if I did, that when my life ends and I go to stand before God, he's going to have one question for me. Why? Why'd you quit? Why? And I'm not going to have an answer for him. Other than
at least not a good one, right?
No, I'm not going to. And every answer I give is just going to be a fail. So I'm like, I can't quit because he's not giving me. He's not going to let me off the hook. He gave me this mission. He gave me this calling. He gave me this purpose. And now he says, go do it. And I'm going to back you. And I'm going to be behind you. And it'll be bumpy, but you're going to do it. And that to me is where, when you have that deep, deep belief that this is why I get out of bed in the morning. This is why I put one foot in front of the other on planet Earth to do this. That to me is when you have ultimately hit that bedrock, that level of this is I'm going to persevere. Even when it doesn't go the way I want it, even when it doesn't work. Now, on the other hand, if you're in an organization or you're involved in a business, like I've seen so many other times, where the vision for the business is so weak, it is so poor, no one buys into it. You know, I know of a company quite well here recently that is just, the vision for the business is terrible. They're making decisions and none of the employees are buying into it. And so what happens, the employees are coming in and putting half-hearted efforts in, and as soon as they get another job offer, they're gone. And it's like, so a big part of all of this is when to persevere or when not to, is how attached are you to the vision of what's being done?
Well, that's what I was going to say too, Don. I was going to say, Don, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too, because you mentioned you started that nonprofit with a partner and realized this wasn't a good fit. So, you know, you didn't just persevere and stay in a bad situation. So there is a time where I think in our journeys where it's wise to make adjustments and make those pivots, right? And so, you know, do you have any thoughts about what are some clues about that? I mean, you've talked about the values for sure. That, you know, is an obvious thing as well. But any other nuances that you've thought about or seen or experienced?
I want to push back a little bit on David, and it goes again back to everybody's a little bit different, right? David and I are like this, right? We're seeing eye to eye on the passion piece, right? I've been in some career transition programs where we talk about this, and people have said, money, the job is all about money. I just need it to pay the bills and do the things I want to do. My passion will be my hobby. It's what I do outside of work. And I think about, these are military guys coming out, guys and gals, and think about, did you really buy into the vision, the mission, or was this just a paycheck, right? And what is that piece that's there? Because I got to do environmental stuff, you know, I love that piece. I love the military. I was growing and developing and adding back in. So there's a piece there that we got to figure out the individual. They got to figure out themselves, right? Why am I here? And it goes back again to Michael Gerber and primary aim. You know, what is it you want out of this?
It's really interesting because I just read the other day in a book about Curtis Martin, who a Hall of Fame running back now, right? That played, I think he played for the Patriots and then the Jets later. There was a story that I read about him. This was fascinating to me. He didn't start playing football until he was like a junior in high school, was phenomenal, and went to college, got drafted, and he had to be talked into staying and playing football. He didn't want to even go to college and play football. And he was like breaking all sorts of like high school records and all this. He didn't want to go to the NFL really, but a pastor told him that he was close to, you have a vision, and his vision was to help his community and do things for a lot of people. He said, let football be the vehicle to get you to accomplish your vision. And so this guy is a Hall of Fame running back in the NFL that didn't even want to play the game, but he did it, and because he had a greater vision for life beyond football. And I thought that was fascinating because it doesn't say, and they weren't saying that he hated football in the sense that, you know, like he didn't wish he didn't do it, I don't think, but it wasn't why he was doing it, right? Going back to David's thing of why, you know, David and I just kind of rewatched the Simon Sinek's Start With Why message from like 10, 12 years ago.
The Golden Circle.
Yeah, the Golden Circle thing, right? And so I think about Curtis Martin in that too. Like his why was so big that he was willing to go through something that he necessarily wouldn't have necessarily chosen, but it funded and it supported his greater vision. So when he got out of the NFL 10 years later, I think it wasn't about winning Super Bowls and getting into the Hall of Fame for him. It was, he saw, like so many pro players, right? They don't know what to do once their career is done. He already knew. He was waiting. He was like chomping at the bit, it sounds like, to get to the end of his career, to do the thing that he, full time, because he probably did it along the way too, right? He started a foundation and he did all these other things along the way, but he was really working towards that day. So football was the vehicle and the funding mechanism to do his vision. So I think, it's very interesting to think about it that way, that jobs and businesses, to your point, Don, maybe if people have say, you know what, I may not love what I do, but I've still got a greater purpose, and this helps allow me to do that, they will persevere through something that maybe others wouldn't.
Which makes me think lately, my again, mindset. My dad had his PhD, but he would never let anybody use that doctor or PhD title unless it was official work, right? So my now wife and I are getting married, doing the engagement announcement. My father-in-law puts doctor, and I said, my dad's not going to agree to that. He says, well, he's a doctor. He worked hard for that. And I called my dad and I said, I just want to double check with you. And he goes, ain't no way. And so when I got out of the military, I find that I kind of downplay that military experience, colonel. It's like, hey, I'm Don. I just love being Don now. But in the last couple of weeks, I've seen people who now have a platform because of their military service, what they've done. And I'm like, why am I not leveraging that platform? So it made me think about that, Chris, when you just said that, right? Was the military my mission, or was it an opportunity to build my platform and my voice to be able to go out and impact others? I love that with Curtis Martin. So,
I thought that was fascinating. And I even think about it this way, there are like executives or former, entrepreneurs that have even stepped away from their companies or the business, and they're authors, they're speakers, they're doing different things. And you're right. They built that. What their success was is that platform that they can now speak, and they get credibility from that, right? Even if they're not the best author or the best speaker, they're respected and listened to because of their past success. And Don, I live in the Dayton, Ohio area, so I'm surrounded by the Air Force and tons of PhDs and accountants and super smart people. And it's fascinating to watch those men and women retire and stay in this area, and to build upon that career that they've had. And doing, so it's like now they've got it's great for them because they have their retirement income from the military, and they get to focus on the things they're passionate about. And many times it's going right back into the civilian service side of it, doing very similar work that they were doing. And if you wouldn't do that, if necessarily, I don't think, for most people, if you didn't want to, right? Like if there's other options and the world has opened up to you, but now these people are saying, you know what, I had a great career, now I want to basically continue that in some way, or they pivot and they say, you know what, that was great. There's another guy I know, he retired a couple years ago, and he started a sports store where he does like lettering, for jackets and uniforms and all these things, and for schools and everything. He bought a company, and he's passionate about that. He's excited. It has nothing to do with his military background, and he had a great career, and he'll tell you that. But now he's doing something as an entrepreneur, buying this business and taking it to a new level. So I think it just, once again, it's this personality differences. I think it's a unique experience.
University of Syracuse, the Institute for Veterans and Military Families, I had to think about that, did a survey, and they've redone it, and they talked to military, and they found that 45% of military leave their first post-military job within 12 months.
Really?
Almost half. Which goes back to the piece of they don't really know what they want to do. They jump back in. I know a lot of people. I did it. I jumped into consulting. I found the niche because I got to go back to environmental. But when my boss started asking me to do facility maintenance and all this other stuff, it's like, that's not what I wanted to do. Right?
Yeah.
I agreed 10%. I want to be a team player, but you're asking me now for 30, 40%. And I got in this cost efficiency project, which really was not my piece. And I stayed there for 3 years trying to make it successful. And finally, after banging my head and having just bruises all over the place, I said, that's enough of that, right?
Yeah.
And I stepped away from that and got some other people in there to replace me. One thing, Scott, who was the vice president of the John Maxwell team initially, Scott
Fay.
He told me on a call one night, he said, make sure when you're leaving the job that you find your replacement. You set them up for success. And that's what I did. And he was just fantastic.
Yeah.
So, but that perseverance piece is a tough one. And I think, what's your mindset? What's your personality? What's driving you as a passion? Is this really it? Is it just a means to an end? I think all of those are fantastic conversation pieces to this question.
The other thing that I'm thinking about, and David jump in here as well, but I've started to really see things among, like, thinking about it as seasons, right? So, when you're young and it's like, my son's getting ready to graduate high school and he's got a plan for where he's going to college now. And that's a next season for him. And he's excited about that. We're excited for him. He doesn't know all the details of what he wants to major in yet, but he knows he's going to go to the right place and the right situation. And so, and I think back to, when I was in college and the season I was in there and then post college. And I feel like, as we go through our lives at different stages and ages, I think sometimes we think that we're supposed to have it all figured out at 18. That's kind of the pressure that we
or
feel.
65.
And then, and people, and people at all ages go, I still trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up. Right. But each season can stack on each other or lead you down that path. Because that's one of the things you talked about, like we said right at the very beginning, was we may have a vision or an idea of a destination, but the path between here and there. And David, you've spoken a lot about this in the past too, is not always what we think, right?
Oh no, life seldom turns out the way we think. Like, we have our plan, and then we have what really happened in our life. And, a lot of things don't go the way that we would expect them to go. But one of the things that I have noticed is that throughout even my life, I look at all the different things that I've done, because I've done a handful of different, very, very different things. I started off a career in banking, became a stay-at-home dad for several years when my kids were small, and then became an entrepreneur. And those
you were a farmer as a kid.
I grew up on a farm as a kid. That's another one. But all of these things, there's a thread that runs all through them of farmers and our entrepreneurs. And that is something very much. And then I went into banking and I learned a ton about how business works. Because I was working directly with the CFO, and I got a first-class education and getting into the nitty-gritty of what makes a business tick and work and grow. And then I became a stay-at-home dad, and my interpersonal skills had to take a dramatic leap up, because I had to learn patience and kindness to 3 little children that at times I was like questioning, what did I do? Yes, they all lived. They're all still going.
They're all productive adults.
They're all productive adults. So, yes, there were times there where I was kind of like questioning, like, what was I doing? This thought of having a family seemed like such a good idea, but now I have them. I don't. What do I do with them? I'd like to know where the return desk is sometimes.
That's right.
But but you look at all that, but if you can focus on certain aspects on there, knowing, like we talked about, knowing your why are you doing this? Because Don talked about earlier about like, hey, I'm going to do this job and that doesn't give me the paycheck, but then my passion is going to be my hobby. I hear that, and I fully appreciate that is a very common perspective, that is out there a lot of people are saying that, but it just also makes me very sad. Because how many hours a week do you spend at that job? This is not a 5-hour a week thing. It's 40 or more for most people, and for some people quite a bit more. And it's going to only be a, situation where you're going only for the paycheck and your heart is not in it at all. And again, how much more productive are you going to be when you put your heart and soul into your job, when you actually care? Go ahead, Don.
It makes me think about that disengaged statistic. 65, 68% are disengaged. Right. what's really behind that? How do you define it? Right.
Right.
And
I
is it
think it's
just,
a lot of the people that you're describing. I'm here for the
yeah,
paycheck.
yeah, I'm coming, I do my job, I get my paycheck, I go.
Right.
But are they really putting their best self into it? Are they, because there's a perseverance piece. There's a quick story. I uh I was at Bitburg, Germany, and for civil engineering, I was the readiness chief as a captain, young captain. And the previous NATO tactical evaluation, big inspection, they had failed the base denial plan portion. And that's when Russia was, if they were coming over the Fulda Gap and they were, overrunning Germany, and we were starting to evacuate back to France or whatever, or Spain, what would we deny on the base so the Russians couldn't use it? So I thought, okay, I got to pick this up. Well, the wing commander gave it to a major over in some base supply. And I thought, why? But okay, how do I support her? And I called her, and I called her a couple of times. Finally, she called me back. She goes, Don, I'm not taking it. I'm not doing that job. I said, but the wing commander gave it to you. And the threat was that the penalty, if we didn't get, if we got a second unsat, myself, because I was the primary person, my commander, my group commander, my wing commander all got to go see the 4-star general and stand at attention in front of him. And that was not going to be a pleasant one-way conversation. So probably somebody was going to lose their job. I know probably I would, right? And others. But so I ended up taking it back from her and in a short order pushing through to figure out all the things that had to be done. And it was because of my mindset of quality and responsibility and getting that job done and the mission that we pushed through it. We got the vice wing commander's approval on a plan before I even talked to my boss about it. Then I came back and back briefed him. So great culture, right? He gave me the authority to go do things. But the whole piece was because I had those characteristics, the values, I pushed through something that was really tough. I could have easily just sat back and said, look, you gave it to somebody else. It's not
Right.
my
Not my
job.
problem anymore. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
But
I couldn't do
part of
that.
your mission is executing on those values.
Mhm.
When you're
Yeah.
saying that, I'm hearing that, I'm going, yeah, but Don, what you're telling me is part of your internal mission
Mhm.
was upholding those values.
That's right.
So when you're doing that, that is tied to your mission and that's tied to your purpose. Even if it's a job that you may not have wanted, your mission and purpose within that task is still being upheld.
That's right. And that became one of the things I loved doing was the readiness piece of the mission. And that's one of the things I got to do when I got with Booz Allen. It was environmental and the emergency management readiness mission. Those were the two things I really wanted to do. And that brought me a lot of inner satisfaction.
But you wouldn't have, and that's the thing, right? I mean, I think to kind of bring this conversation to a close for today, it's you had to go through the different opportunities, the different challenges, the different things that you did in order to really hone in on, the things you are passionate about, that deeper why that led you to persevere. And so, folks, we want to just really remind you that if you're just doing a business just because you think you want to make a lot of money, well, yeah, you may start there, but you're going to quickly realize that there's a whole lot of things in the middle that are going to discourage you if that's your purpose. Now, some people keep pushing through because maybe they're more like David, right? They're going to charge that bull, and they're going to figure it out. But along the way, I would also say perseverance doesn't mean just keep doing the same thing over and over and banging your head against the wall, to your point, Don. But sometimes it's okay. I've tried this, but that didn't work. So it's veering to the left or the right or over the top or whatever. It's finding your way, right? So perseverance isn't it's this way or no way. It's this way or okay, that didn't seem to work. So what else might I do? It's the thing that the kind of terminology that's really helped me in the last couple or 3 years is thinking like a scientist thinks, right? A
Yeah.
scientist says, I have a theory and I'm going to experiment and try to figure this thing out. And that's where the whole Edison things comes into, the 1,000 or 10,000 failures, whatever the number actually is, until he got the light bulb to work, right? Like he didn't fail once and say, well, I'm done. He was like, well, that didn't work. So let's try this. And if that didn't work, let's try this. And to me, that's perseverance in a way for entrepreneurship and life in general. It's, staying the course and being agile and adaptable along the way. So Don, any last thoughts before we wrap things up today?
No, just I think the only thing which you just emphasized, if you don't know what the end point is, right?
Right.
If you think it's the task, then when that task doesn't go right, you'll quit. When you have Edison, I want to create something that illuminates the room.
Yeah.
He didn't know it was a light bulb at the time.
Right.
He didn't know how I was going to do it. So I'm gonna figure this out till I create something that illuminates this room
Mhm.
versus sitting in front of the fireplace, right? It's like Abraham Lincoln and reading his books, and
Mhm.
ruining your eyes. So you got to have that end point, that destination, the think and grow rich, the desire. So it's
Mhm.
so clear.
Yeah.
And as I worked with military, they say, "Well, I want to get a job." Okay, well, what kind of job? Well, one that pays the bills. How do you like Starbucks barista? Oh, my Don, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Okay, so what do you really want to do, right?
Right.
So I think there's a piece in there about that clarity of the endpoint, which is important that you were emphasizing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I
Well,
think
Don,
this is all
Don,
good stuff. Thank you.
yeah, thank you for coming on and having this conversation, because we know that
Mhm.
this journey is a challenge at times, right? We know that not all the things are going to go right, even today,
That's
right?
right.
Our best laid plans are flawed many times, and so
Mhm.
so folks, that's why we have we do this podcast. That's why we have our Design Launch Grow program, where we can help entrepreneurs create those courses or coaching programs or training workshops, the things that you want to help people with. If you need help, if you need in that community, David, you mentioned that right at the beginning, that importance of community to support us when we're going through these challenging times, building the dream. That's what Design Launch Grow is all about. So check out designlaunchgrow.com if you have an interest in getting that help, that coaching, that training, that community. And we'd love to talk to you about that. So hope that this has been helpful to you guys today. And we look forward to seeing you next time.